Our reading this morning is from Mark Bellatini. For religion to be significant, it has to provide more than the comforts of community. It also has to provide opportunities for deepening, for what I call spiritual growth, and for casting down of false images and stereotypes, which hurt us all. A good religion has to open us to the real diversity of the modern world. For our work as liberal religious people, it is not to be competitive with others and to find ways to supersede others, but rather to find ways to supersede ourselves, to grow beyond our limitations and our constrictive boundaries, each and every one of us. Diversity, you see, must not end up being some sort of the feel-good slogan, a word we keep in our back pocket to make us feel like we're broad-minded. Diversity is a gift, but it cannot be a gift unless it is received. It is only received when there are hands and hearts open to enough to receive it. And the opening of fists into welcoming hands and welcoming hearts is our spiritual work.
Over the course of the spring, I was following a series by Jessica Gross, an opinion writer for the New York Times. She was exploring this idea that Americans are losing their religion. The statistics, which are often misread, tell us that, yes, church attendance is on the decline and has dropped precipitously since the late 90s. But the religiosity of those who don't attend has not changed much. People walk away from the institutional church for any number of reasons, and many shift their beliefs based on life experiences, altering their practices alongside of this change. Raised in the Black Christian church, encounter Islam through political connections, question a God figure, and take to Buddhist practices, just one example. The truth is that it's more acceptable, much more acceptable in our culture now to not be an adherent of any particular faith and to move from one to another. That doesn't mean, however, that our beliefs and personal behaviors have moved away from religion. It just means that it's okay to identify as unaffiliated. We've heard all about the nuns, and we often say that they are ripe for Unitarian Universalism because we have no creed or requirements about belief and practice. So let me first dispel the underlying "you can do whatever you want" message inherent in that thinking. As a whole, collectively, we believe in a lot of things in common, affirm and promote a set of principles, and an anything goes attitude to behavior rubs up against what we say we value. Some things are simply not acceptable, and we shouldn't be afraid to say so. Gross says that we spend a lot of time thinking about what the nuns aren't. They aren't churchgoers. And we spend less time thinking about what they are, how their lives have intersected with their beliefs, how their living has shaped their seeking, how their view of the transcendent still holds meaning for them. The American church, according to the authors of The Great Dechurching, Who's Leaving, Why Are They Going, and What Will It Take to Bring Them Back? Quite a title, but the American church is built for a specific kind of person on a very narrow track. The nuclear family, educated, raising children inside of a marriage. If you are not traveling on that track, you find yourself without a religious home. Ultimately, for those who don't fit that mold, church is often less welcoming. We pride ourselves on being welcoming, but I wonder what track one needs to be on to feel acceptance in our tradition and on a micro level to sense it here in our particular community. In her May report, Gross said that Christianity has a branding problem. And we have talked about that of late here. The association with nationalist political views is a turnoff for many more moderate evangelicals and Protestants. And I think we, UUs, have a branding problem too. Just the other day, one of our leadership was in conversation with a local nonprofit director who expressed a belief that we were just some kind of woo-woo spiritual community up here on the hill. So a quick review of our beliefs and values set them straight, and suddenly they were interested in us. I've been touting this since I arrived here, the idea that if we don't talk about who we are publicly, people will develop their own ideas and shy away from even checking us out. If you believe our faith tradition has something to offer, then don't be afraid to talk it up. Lightning will not strike. I'm still here. Alongside this series, I was blessed to receive a copy of Soul Boom, Why We Need a Spiritual Revolution by Rainn Wilson, who some of you probably know as Dwight Schrute from the sitcom The Office. Well, it turns out he's a lifelong practitioner of the Baha'i faith that professes a belief in God as an unknowable essence, which is at the same time very close to us as beings. They purpose themselves toward the collective good, compassionate relationships, unity in diversity, and ultimately unity on a global scale, arrived at as we go about integrating and disrupting life as we know it. Wilson talks about many of the same phenomena that Gross points to. He raises the many pandemics of our world and systems, our global brokenness, and suggests that we need to develop a new religion. He lists 10 foundations of faith, which include a higher power, prayer, community, transcendence, service, and purpose, to name a few. And in response to those, he offers a faith tradition characterized by these in some form or another, but not the standard Americanized version, to be sure. No sky daddy God, but a creative cosmic force, he says. No hell that we die and go to, but acknowledging the hell on earth that we sometimes create in our living. Some kind of disciplined spiritual practice that's also practical. Nurturance of the primal longing for something larger than ourselves. Diverse community leading to social revolution. A moral compass based in all the various traditions we know. The force of love, increased compassion, service to the poor, grounded in empowerment, a shift in how our systems serve. And finally, personal meaning making alongside collective purpose. To these responses to the foundations, he adds, no clergy, harmony in diversity, centrality of the divine feminine and of justice, cooperation between science and faith, a profound connection to the natural world, and an emphasis on music and art, and humility, knowing that we can't know it all. Does any of this sound familiar to you? I want to write to him and ask him if he's ever heard of Unitarian Universalism. It's that branding thing again. His 5-part travelogue docuseries, The Geography of Bliss, had him traveling the globe in search of what makes us happiest and not so happy. The bottom line in all cases was community. And it turns out that this is something the folks surveyed for Gross's piece mentioned frequently as well. The research shows that we can find community in lots of places, but most lack the kind of wraparound support that we find in churches. She says, quote, "A soccer team can't provide spiritual solace in the face of death, probably doesn't have a weekly charitable call, and there is no sense of connection to heritage that goes back generations," end quote. We, as Americans, seem to be piecing these things together as best as we can, as opposed to the one-stop shopping that church offers. At General Assembly this summer, I attended a workshop called Disrupting Church, offered by the Reverend Peggy Clark from the Community Church of New York, Unitarian Universalist, along with her Director of Religious Education. At the outset, she announces that our churches are shrinking, aging, and becoming increasingly irrelevant. And she asks us to consider 4 things. Where do we do church? When do we do church? How do we do church? Who is welcome at our church? I jotted down some responses with us in mind. 819 Main Street, in small groups, the thrift shop. On Sundays, in monthly meetings of those small groups, daily in the summer. We worship together and we attend a lot of meetings. We welcome like-minded or like-valued people who are demographically similar to us. She shared a story about her earliest time at Community Church. They had been in a process of divestment of their buildings and were meeting for worship across the way at the Episcopal Church. This was fine until Christmas Eve, when the Episcopalians needed their space. Community Church had a long-standing tradition of performing the Messiah on Christmas Eve. Now what would they do? Unwilling to give it up, they decided to perform it on the front steps. It was freezing out, but they persisted. And all of a sudden, the folks living across the street in sky-high apartments began opening their windows to listen. People passing by stopped to hear what was happening. Her young son noticed the unhoused man below on the street, brought him a blanket, and later some hot chocolate. Suddenly, the where and how and who of doing church shifted. Their purpose changed from performing the Messiah to singing together and telling stories and helping those in need. They began to think of themselves across boundaries and to examine what church is there for. The pandemic deepened their questioning, acknowledging a shifting context. Reverend Peggy presented a graphic depicting 3 phases of church life over the past century or so, illustrating the shift in culture and how it pertains to church. For a long time, the church was made up of subjects, subject to a higher authority, who saw church as duty and obedience to a religion or a religious dogma. The subjects were in receiving mode. They followed commands, subjective in terms of belief. This period was followed by the consumer church, and it is where we are kind of stuck now. Folks are independent, and church is for them, serves them in some way that they believe they have a right to. It is materially based. We make demands of it. It serves us, and we choose how. It is bureaucratic and objective. The third category, and where she says we need to be headed if we are to survive and thrive, is as the citizen church. In that model, we are interdependent, working with all the voices around us. It is spiritual in nature. It participates actively in the culture in which it is embedded. It is creative as opposed to reactionary. Facilitates what is needed based on what it discovers in its networking. It is deliberative in shared conversation about the citizen story. To get there, we need to develop some comfort with discomfort, be willing to approach what is next with a beginner's mind, letting go of expectations. The upshot of all of this for me is not that we are losing our religion at all. What we may need to be willing to lose is the forms our religion has taken for as long as we can remember, and that is really hard to do. But the bottom line is that our world is changing, and people's expectations of religion are changing with it. There are few folks younger than me who are interested in the institutions we have come to know and love in our lifetimes. And even for me, a firmly ensconced boomer who was raised in the institutional church, I can see the need to take what we say we value to the streets in order to make a difference in our world that I see as desperately needed. Can we think about ways to be in conversation with the community around us? Can we dare to be creative in our times together? Having rebelled against power over structures and taken back our own power, can we now move to power with? To an empowerment model that brings our values into the realities of everyday life. This is where I see the church of the not too distant future happening. Not 1 or 2 days a week, but in continuous collaboration based in the love we profess as the very spirit of our existence together. That with what we encounter going on around us. Dear ones, the world and our community need what we have to offer. This is a saving faith for the here and now, not some far-off future life. How we package it will make all the difference in our reach, and how humbly we offer it will ensure its acceptance. Let's not lose our religion, but instead set it loose with the passion and creativity it deserves. So may it be, and amen.